Once upon a time, not too long ago, there was a girl named Sam. Now, Sam loved art. She loved to draw and paint and create, but she also loved puzzles and problem solving and logic and maths and physics. So when the time came for this younger version of myself to decide on a career, she felt she was caught at a crossroads. Would she pursue something in art or maybe in tech? And how could she decide when she loved both? During this dilemma, I found a middle ground. Animation seemed like the perfect fit, plenty of creativity, and then a bit of tech as well. So off I went, and in my third and final year of studying animation, my team created a 3.5-minute short film called Aurora that won a couple of awards at some small animation and film festivals. I'm still so proud of this short film 8 years later, because to me, what is so much more rewarding than any award could ever be is seeing how people reacted to it. Without spoiling it, in case you want to check it out afterwards, the ending is sad and bittersweet. And in fact, a few years ago, the React YouTube channel made a video where they had a couple of people watch and react to this short film. And despite the theatrics, getting to see people reacting like this, as well as going through the comments on the YouTube video of the animation itself, and seeing how a story we created had such a strong impact on people meant the world to me. Some people, however, did not appreciate the ending, and one of my favorite comments decided to let us know this by blaming the first person in the credits, who happened to be me. And I've hidden a spoiler, but this comment, "What the fletch is the purpose of this? Cruel and heartless," redacted. "Damn you, Samantha." So 6 of us worked on creating the story, so I can't take the credit to that level. It's just really so rewarding to know that something we put our hearts and souls into affected people so strongly. Heading into my animation career, I got to work with an amazing team on multiple award-winning TV short films and animated shorts, which allowed me the opportunity to travel to Annecy, the animation festival in France, where we celebrated one of those short films winning the Crystal Award, which is a pretty big deal in the world of animation. With this middle ground and several successful projects, it looked like we were heading straight for happily ever after. Except something was missing. You know that feeling where it just doesn't sit right, no matter how many times you tell yourself it's fine, but you just can't shake it? There was something missing for the problem-solving side of me. Don't get me wrong, there were plenty of problems that needed solving. It just wasn't right. So I thought, after getting to work with the programs that we used in animation, allowing me to do a teensy bit of coding, and I loved that, I thought maybe pursuing a career in coding was more suitable for me. But the idea of going back into studying is also terrifying because there are so many incredibly skilled people in the animation industry in South Africa alone. What if studying doesn't work out and I fall so far behind that I can't get back into the industry? I may never have another opportunity like this again. I convinced myself that, worst case scenario, learning coding would still be useful in the animation industry. I'd just pursue a far more technical role. And I took that leap. The plot twist in my animation journey took me to a 2-year coding course called We Think Code, and ultimately led to me standing here today. I'm still Sam. I still love art and puzzles, and for the last 4 years, I have worked primarily as a Java developer at BBD. When there's a big change, or sometimes even a small one, we tend to compare one thing from the other, don't we? I was so sure that by changing to a coding career, I would be in a completely different situation, that I'd get away from some of the things in my experience of animation that made me so frustrated. Surely, developing software and telling a story are completely different, right? Except I began to notice some similarities, and I would like to share some of those with you today. One of the first things I learned very quickly in the art-driven industry is that your individual artist identity can really get in your own way when working on a production with multiple people. And that makes sense though, doesn't it? In order to tell a story effectively, all the moving parts, from the people working on creating the story to the story itself, need to work and flow together. Which is why you'll have directors, art directors, story directors, technical directors, and so on, all giving feedback and critique to guide all the moving parts to deliver that final production together. And that means learning to let go of that identity by understanding that the feedback isn't a criticism of you and that you don't have to get things perfectly on the first attempt. For example, if my individual artist identity was convinced that everything that I need to work on must have the groundbreaking style and color of the first Twilight film. This would be very jarring for you as the viewer if you were watching your favorite superhero movie and it suddenly went from this to this. I was so grateful that I learned this lesson when I did, because I distinctly remember starting my coding career and making my first code change and submitting it for review, and ding, there's a comment. Hey Sam, could you just update this? Ah, shoot, I should have done that. Okay, let me get to that. Ding. Sam, can you remove this, please? See that. Okay, let me get to that. Ding. Can you update this? Ding. Can you change that? Ding. And I would have taken it personally, maybe thinking that either I wasn't good enough or that the people giving me the feedback had something against me. But I knew that it wasn't about me or me needing to be right. The feedback was given to help me adjust my code to the standard of the team and prevent me from breaking any code. Having this realization made me wonder, are there more? Are there more experiences from my animation days that have given me the tools and the knowledge to be able to navigate the complexities of the world of tech? It seemed unlikely. If we look at the typical 3D animation pipeline, it can be divided into 3 sections. Pre-production, where the animation is planned out and visualized. Production, where all the elements of the animation are created. And post-production, where those elements are brought together to create that final image. I mainly worked in the production, specifically 3D rigging and 3D visual effects, but we'll get there. Pre-production builds up the initial idea creation, starting from the story and the script writing, which is very similar to the beginning of anything, really. An app, a feature, having the idea, writing it down, and preferably not in a notes app where it will be lost to time. And then we have storyboarding, where the story is roughly drawn out, shot by shot, and helps portray the different aspects of the characters, the environment they're in, and the camera angles. This is often used to pitch a story, and in some cases give feedback to improve it further, by having someone present it to also give it a sense of pacing. For example, if I wanted to create an animated short for a shopping commercial, and I had my story and I wanted to pitch it to you, it would go something like this. Our scene is in the shopping store. The camera pans past the aisles as we see in the back our character moves, the shopper. As the shopper pushes his trolley, we see there are more items in his cart. We cut to a close-up of a grocery list where the shopper has checked off their final item. And we look at the shopper and see his face, seeing a smile at the fact that he's completed the list. But a look of confusion comes across his face. And we go back to the shopping list, and the camera pans slightly down to show something we have missed. A gift with an exclamation mark to show that it's important. The camera backs away to see the shopper in the middle of an aisle, panickingly looking up from the realization that they have forgotten this gift. They begin to look around for anything that could be suitable. And as we shift slightly, we see a small purple glow come from the side of the screen. The shopper then also notices it, and the camera cuts close to the shopper's face, where we can still see that purple glow in their eyes. The glow expands into a flashback, where we see our shopper smiling and laughing with another character in a little purple boat, the same color as that glow. The flashback fades out back to that close-up. We see the shopper smile, they move forward and pick up a small model of that purple boat from a display aisle. And we cut to promotion. In software development, if you're pitching a new service or an app or a new feature, it's pretty common to use a user story to quickly and effectively portray the intentions of your idea. So, to keep to the theme, if I was to pitch a new format for the online grocery shopping user experience, it could go something like this. As a user, I want to be able to swipe through digital shop-like aisles that are titled and have thumbnail images of the products in the aisles, so that, at a glance, I can quickly find the products and categories that I'm looking for. As a user, I want to be able to enter that digital aisle and see the subcategories grouped in shelves, also with the thumbnail images of the product, so that I can quickly either select the product or the subcategory to find the product that I am looking for. And finally, as a business, we want to present recommended products or promotions to the users with integrated display units, so that the recommendations can easily be seen and engaged with by the user without disrupting their shopping experience or forcing them to navigate elsewhere. The next step in pre-production is the animatic, which initially takes the storyboard into a video format and will be updated as the production continues, with sounds, recent shots, and any changes, which isn't too different from having a wireframe to demonstrate a user journey, or a proof of concept and demonstrations that can also be updated. We then enter the design phase, where we would have the style of and the color palette of the animation created for everything, including characters, the environment, and the specific props, deciding on what will be followed throughout the production. Which isn't too different from any initial web design, or the first plans for the user interface or experience, or what many back-end developers fear, CSS. Now that the designs are locked down, we can start the production section. And this can be an absolute nightmare to manage, as there are so many moving parts that work together at the same time. Using these finalized designs, we would start the 3D modeling, building iterations of the geometry for everything in the production. Now, my amazing friend helped me by modeling some of my little grocery store, and I was reminded that it's amazing how much character can be shown in simple objects. The earlier iterations are brought into 3D layout, and this is a very important part of the planning, because it considers scale and placement, and not just for the items, for the camera and the characters as well. What's really great and important about these two working together is that 3D layout helps prevent time going into certain models unnecessarily. If you imagine that modeling being similar to data object creation and how it would be passed around by services and stored in databases, and 3D layout being very similar to a solutions architect, designing the complex technical solutions to meet the business needs, while considering the many different aspects and components and how they would work together. So if I wanted to actually create that animated commercial, I don't need to model an entire shopping center or even the entire store. And I don't need to go into specific details on models that you are only going to see for a split second. There's no need to build what you aren't going to see and waste render time down the line. But that is also risky. Once the 3D models are locked down, they are sent for their final texturing and rigging, as beginning tests would have been tried on for earlier iterations of the models. The texturing is pretty self-explanatory, adding color and texture to the geometry, like implementing that UI or UX and CSS from the earlier web designs. But for those who don't know what rigging is, we essentially take a digital skeleton and map the geometry to follow it. And before we hide that skeleton, we add controls for the animators to use to allow for an easier interaction with the rigs. Similar to how backend services are developed to get and process data while also keeping that complexity behind the scenes with minimal interactions, for example, with APIs. And this is where taking the shortcuts becomes risky. It's important to get things signed off really early, because after a certain point, it becomes very difficult and costly to correct a mistake. During one of the productions I worked on, I was given a couple of characters to rig. And I was quite surprised when I noticed that underneath their clothes, they were missing some of their body geometry. Now, you may be thinking, but Sam, you just said that you don't need to model the stuff you aren't going to see. So it makes sense if you're not going to model the geometry. And I would agree with you. If I hadn't seen in the storyboard and the animatic that these characters have a shot where they go get their clothes after a bath, and you would definitely notice their floating necks above the void of their body. It was too late down the pipeline for us to change this geometry, but thankfully we managed to make a plan by putting hand towels around their necks to cover it up. But I doubt it would take long for anyone here to think of a time where they've had to come up with some sort of workaround to a problem that probably could have been avoided. I learned that sometimes it's better to do things the hard way from the beginning to prevent issues down the line. Or, as I like to put it, you better hope there isn't a landmine in that corner you're cutting. Next in the pipeline is animation. And this will be for anything, from the characters to the props and the environment, to the camera itself. Much like how we will implement front-end behavior while using the different services and tools that were built earlier for it. The animation really brings things to life, even just in the subtlest of movements. But first we need to set it up. Very often the animators will record themselves acting out the scenes for reference, for every character, just to get an idea of the movement. And then they'll have the initial layout, which looks terrifying. The layout turns into blocking, breaking down the steps, and this eventually gets refined and into final and polish to truly carry the story. If there's a need for 3D visual effects in the shot as well, the animation will be cashed out and handed to the VFX team. The priority of the shots which get animated first will depend on the complexity of the animation or the VFX, and the VFX too. And there are usually all sorts of tricks to create effective results. There was a shot that I was given where an object was floating off of the ground into the sky, and a camera followed it, and I was given the job of making a ribbon swirl up around with this object. So I import the scene because the initial plan was simple. Take in the scene, bring the object, set up a little cloth simulation to follow that object up into the sky and just adjust slightly to sell it. So I set up my cloth, I connected to the object, and I pressed play. And nothing happened. I thought, okay, maybe I've made a mistake. I can see in the approved animation that things are moving. Maybe the movement's somewhere else. So I attached the cloth to the camera, since it's also moving. And I press play, and still nothing. That was when I actually decided to look at the scene, and I realized what the problem was. Instead of animating the character and the camera upwards, the animator had made the entire room move down. So that meant that what was meant to be a quick, easy simulation became animate a piece of geometry, frame by frame, to help maintain this illusion of movement that wasn't actually happening. So a similar problem to the risks of 3D layout and modeling had happened. An isolated solution to create the illusion of something happening, then carried on down the line without the needed communication and planning, and the costs other teams further in the pipeline, as they now had to implement their own solutions and workarounds that weren't accounted for to maintain this illusion. The smoke and mirrors are cool until someone is blinded by the smoke and then runs into the mirrors. For my first 3D visual effects shot, my big visual effects shot, I was given the scene where smoke is blown off of a surface. And I was so excited. I was going to get to work with particle effects and have things like velocity and density and animate a wind to interact with those particles so they will swirl and wisp up into the air. And so I set up my scene and I send it for a review. And the art director comes back to me and is like, I understand why you did it this way, but we're wanting more of a cartoony look without clouds. Here's some reference, have a go. Okay, well, creating cartoony clouds generally isn't ideal for realistic particle simulation, but we'll make a plan. And so I take the feedback, I make an adjustment, I submit the next version, he gives me more feedback, I submit after the changes, and I get more feedback, and I tweak this, and more feedback, and I tweak that. And about a month later, we're on version 32-ish, and we are there. We've got it. And then my team gets called into a meeting with the director. What happened is that it turned out that the director and the art director were on completely different pages with the style of the visual effects for the whole production. So the director was now sitting with the entire team and going through every single shot one by one to see if things needed to be changed. So we get to my shot, and the project manager brings up my latest version for the director to see, and the director says, I was hoping for a more wispy, swirly smoke. Let me try find a picture for you as an example. And as he begins to Google for this reference, I sit and I smile and I turn to the project manager and I say, can you show him version 1, please? And he loved it. Perfect. Just a little tweak here and a tweak there, and we'll be good. Version 1 of 32. I'm not exaggerating, that still upsets me. A lot of the time, when we look back on a situation, there's oh, if only I planned this better, if I'd managed that better, or if I kept a closer eye on everyone, this wouldn't have happened. But if there's anything that this situation taught me, is that no matter your role or where you are, you can still be out of the loop. And that's why methodologies like Agile and Scrum are so successful when correctly applied, with the constant feedback from different perspectives, preventing you from getting caught up in making your little bubble perfect and losing track of that bigger picture. You can steer the ship, but you cannot control every part of the boat. The last parts of the production section are the lighting, finaling, and rendering. Lighting is crucial for setting the mood and the atmosphere of a shot by adjusting the positions, intensity, and colors of the digital light, along with the obvious purpose of allowing us to see everything in the shot. Finaling is an important role too, and I don't think it gets acknowledged as much as it should be. The job of a finalist is to bring everything into the scene that is about to be rendered, from the environment, the props, the animated characters, visual effects, if there are any, the digital lights, the camera, and they make sure that everything is set up for the shot. So if a prop is moved by a character, the finalist will make sure that in the next shot, that prop is still moved. And I can use the animation I did while studying as an example, because if you have a character who is walking to a bench with a lunchbox in their hand, which they're going to put down on the bench, you need to make sure that that lunchbox in their hand isn't already on the bench. Oops. Rendering will then export the 3D scene frame by frame into 2D images, taking the combination of those lights, the materials, and the models for the final section, post-production. Post-production consists of compositing, any additional 2D visual effects if needed, and color correction. Compositing works very closely with rendering because to render everything in your shot for a single image at once can take a lot of time and resources because it will calculate every single individual light ray bouncing around your shot with the textures, any movements, and everything else. So if you make a slight mistake, like a lunchbox that shouldn't be there, it will take a lot of time and resources to re-render. So different elements are rendered on separate layers that are then given to the compositing team and that will bring those separate images together. Adjusting will then happen there, like with color correction, to create that final image if needed. So this takes advantage of effective planning to bring everything together in a timely manner. And it can really, really make a massive difference in the last stages of a production. There's a lot of nuance in these last sections. So comparing to coding won't really align easily, but every shot and the elements in them going through the pipeline one by one is very similar to the continuous integration and deployment. With the processes, with that in the software development, iteratively working through those components, bringing the development and the setup to be deployed, pulling it together to get that final product. So here's the thing. I can tell you story after story about the lessons that I have learned, and I do genuinely hope that you are able to take from those. But more than that, way, way more than that, is that I hope that you are able to take from the lessons that you have already learned or are in the process of learning. To take an experience, evaluate the situation, look at what can be controlled, and taking that to see how you can apply it in other areas of your life. Okay, but Sam, we didn't do animation, so how is this relevant to me? And that's fair. So let me use some of the other aspects of my life. Fun fact about me, I know how to build a raft because once upon a time, I took a part in the scouting and guiding competition called Kontiki. And in Kontiki, your team has less than 24 hours to build a raft that 6 of you are going to live on for 24 hours. You can see me right over there living my best life. Most of us have some form of experience of sharing a cramped living space with several people, whether it's with your family, traveling, or sharing with your first roommates. So we can all agree that the last thing that you want in that cramped living space is for it to start sinking. So we would make a lot of effort to prepare and plan for the actual event by marking and color-coding ropes and logs, making sure we knew exactly where every single thing should go to be able to move as efficiently as possible, while also making sure that everything was done correctly for survival reasons. The motto of the guiding and scouting movement is be prepared. And I try to apply this in all the aspects of my life, every day. And I can see some slight nods and smiles of the people who know of all the random things that are in my handbag. An example of this is that I always try to carry a sewing kit. And I got teased relentlessly for this because I was being so extra. Why would you need a sewing kit? But let me tell you, when that terrible day came and I dropped something and I lunged to get it and I heard that rip, that little sewing kit, that little low effort thing in my handbag for just in case, saved my day and what was left of my dignity. Throughout our lives, we all have experiences that we may not want to remember. But we can all agree that every experience has the elements of a lesson that we can take and apply in the future. From the choices we make to the things out of our control, it's up to us to find those elements and move forward with them. Again, finding the things that we can control and deciding what we can do and how we can take these elements into other worlds of our lives. Ladies, gentlemen, and gentle people, my name is still Sam. I still enjoy art and problem solving, and I would like to challenge each and every one of you to go out and find those elements and take your lessons further than just once upon a time. Thank you.